Ambassador Quilex 9 adjusted his breathing apparatus for the 15th time in 10 minutes, a nervous habit that had developed ever since the Council assigned him to this particular diplomatic mission. The recycled air tasted metallic, which was infinitely better than breathing the actual atmosphere of this cursed space station. Who in their right mind built a diplomatic outpost in orbit around a death world? Oh right, the humans. Remind me again why we agreed to this meeting. Quilex muttered to his aide, a particularly anxious Vorthak named Zeebo who had the unfortunate habit of molting when stressed. The floor around Zeebo's feet was already littered with purple scales. Because, sir, Zeebo replied, his voice crackling through the universal translator, the humans claimed they had something that would, quote, blow our minds without actually blowing our heads off, unquote. The council found this intriguing. Quilex snorted, a sound that came out as a wet gurgle through his breathing apparatus. The humans find everything intriguing. Last week they sent us a 30-page report about their discovery that some Earth creatures called tardigrades could survive in the vacuum of space. They seemed genuinely surprised that not every species considers this remarkable. The docking bay doors hissed open with a sound that made both aliens jump. Humans, as it turned out, designed their mechanical systems to be unnecessarily intimidating. Everything had to hiss, clank, or emit some form of threatening noise. Quilex often wondered if they did this on purpose or if it was just another delightful quirk of Deathworld engineering. What emerged from the human transport vessel was not what either alien expected. By the void's endless darkness, Zeebo whispered, molting so rapidly he looked like he was standing in a purple snowstorm. Is that a juvenile human? Indeed it was. The creature couldn't have been more than 12 Earth years old, which by any civilized species standards was barely past the larval stage. She had bright red hair that seemed to defy both gravity and common sense. Freckles scattered across her pale skin like some kind of adorable plague, and eyes so blue they practically glowed. She wore what appeared to be a standard human jumpsuit, though it had been modified with patches, pins, and what looked suspiciously like explosive devices. She was also smiling. Humans had this disturbing habit of baring their teeth when they were happy, and this particular human had very white, very sharp teeth. "Hello there," the young human called out, her voice carrying across the docking bay with the kind of enthusiasm that made seasoned warriors reach for their weapons. "I'm Emma-Kate Thompson. Are you the guys I'm supposed to terrify today?" Quilex felt his secondary heart skip a beat. "All three of them. Terrify?" he managed to croak. "Oh, sorry," Emma-Kate said, bouncing on her toes in a way that suggested she had far too much energy for any civilized being. "I mean demonstrate human capabilities too, but Mom says that's just a fancy way of saying terrify, so I figured I'd cut to the chase." A larger human emerged from the transport behind her, and Quilex felt a wave of relief. Finally, an adult to take charge of this obvious mistake. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, and had the kind of scars that suggested he'd survived things that would have killed most species 3 times over. Surely he would explain that there had been some kind of error, that they hadn't actually brought a juvenile to a diplomatic demonstration. "Ambassador Quilex, I presume?" the man said, extending his hand in the traditional human gesture of friendship that looked disturbingly like a threat. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison, Emma-Kate's handler." Handler? As if the small human was some kind of dangerous animal that needed to be contained, which, considering what Quilex knew about Deathworld species, might not be far from the truth. "There's been a mistake," Quilex said, trying to maintain his diplomatic composure while his aide continued to molt behind him. "We were expecting a demonstration of human military capabilities, not this." Emma-Kate tilted her head to one side, and Quilex noticed that the movement was eerily similar to how Terran predators sized up their prey. "Oh, there's no mistake," she said cheerfully. "I am the demonstration." "You are a child," Zeebo squeaked from behind his rapidly growing pile of shed scales. "I'm 12, Emma-Kate corrected, as if this was a significant distinction. "That's practically an adult by Deathworld standards. I have already survived 3 assassination attempts, 2 poisoning incidents, and a really bad case of what humans call food poisoning from eating gas station sushi." Quilex blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence, a nervous habit he'd developed when dealing with humans. "Assassination attempts? On a juvenile?" Captain Morrison cleared his throat, a sound that somehow managed to be both apologetic and threatening. The council requested a demonstration of what makes humans so resilient. Emma-Kate here volunteered to show you exactly what it means to be born on a Deathworld. Volunteered, Quilex repeated slowly. A 12-year-old volunteered for a military demonstration. Technically, I demanded to be included, Emma-Kate said, her grin widening in a way that showed even more teeth. When I heard that some aliens thought humans were just lucky survivors, I got a little offended. We are not lucky, Ambassador Quilex. We are just really, really good at not dying. The way she said not dying made it sound like it was some kind of competitive sport. Perhaps, Quilex said carefully, we should begin with something simple. Basic physical capabilities, maybe? Emma-Kate clapped her hands together, a sharp sound that made both aliens flinch. Oh, good. I love the physical stuff. Want to see me break something? Break something, Zeebo whispered. With my bare hands, Emma-Kate added helpfully, or my head. I'm really good with my head. Captain Morrison pulled out a tablet and tapped it a few times. We have prepared a series of demonstrations that should give you a good understanding of human capabilities. Nothing too extreme, of course. Emma-Kate is still developing. Still developing. Quilex tried very hard not to think about what a fully developed human might be capable of if this was what they considered a juvenile. The first test area was what humans optimistically called a gymnasium, though it looked more like a torture chamber to Quilex's untrained eye. There were metal bars hanging from the ceiling, heavy objects scattered around the floor, and what appeared to be a series of increasingly dangerous obstacles. Standard physical fitness test, Captain Morrison explained. Nothing Emma-Kate hasn't done 100 times before. Emma-Kate cracked her knuckles, a sound that made Zeebo jump so hard he left a perfect outline of himself in molted scales on the wall behind him. Time me, she called out, then took off running. What followed could only be described as organized chaos. The young human attacked the obstacle course like it had personally insulted her family. She swung from bar to bar with the casual ease of someone who had never heard of gravity, flipped over walls that were twice her height, and lifted weights that should have been physically impossible for someone her size. But it wasn't just her physical capabilities that were impressive. It was the way she approached each challenge with what could only be described as gleeful determination. When she encountered a wall that was too smooth to climb, she didn't go around it. She punched handholds into it. When she reached a gap that was too wide to jump, she didn't look for another route. She grabbed a heavy metal bar, used it as a pole vault, and launched herself across with enough force to dent the landing platform. Is she laughing? Quilex asked, watching as Emma-Kate dangled upside down from a rope, her red hair hanging in gravity-defying spirals. Humans laugh when they are happy, Captain Morrison explained. Emma-Kate is very happy. She's happy while hanging upside down 30 feet above a metal floor. Especially then. Quilex made a mental note to request hazard pay for this assignment. Emma-Kate dropped down from the rope with a grace that would have made a professional acrobat weep with envy, then jogged back over to where the aliens were standing. She wasn't even breathing hard. That was fun, she announced. What's next? Combat demonstration, Captain Morrison said, consulting his tablet again, hand-to-hand combat against training drones. Combat. Quilex's voice went up 3 octaves, which was particularly impressive considering his species only had 2 vocal cords. Against a child? Against a human, Emma-Kate corrected, and for just a moment, her cheerful expression shifted into something that made Quilex take a step backward. There's a difference. The combat drones were activated, and Quilex found himself watching something that would probably give him nightmares for the rest of his considerably extended lifespan. The drones were standard military training units, designed to provide challenging but non-lethal combat experience for adult soldiers. They moved fast, hit hard, and were programmed to adapt to their opponent's fighting style. Emma-Kate destroyed them. Not defeated, not overcame, destroyed. She moved like liquid violence, flowing around their attacks and striking back with a precision that was absolutely terrifying in someone so young. When one drone came at her with a shock weapon, she grabbed it barehanded, ignored the electrical current that should have knocked her unconscious, and used it to beat 2 other drones into scrap metal. The electrical discharge from that weapon is designed to incapacitate a full-grown Zentaurian warrior, Zeebo whispered, his molting now reaching unprecedented levels. Emma-Kate's been building up a resistance to electrical shock since she was 8, Captain Morrison said casually. Standard Deathworld Childhood Precaution. Standard Childhood Precaution. Quilex was beginning to understand why humans had such a reputation in the galaxy. The demonstration continued with what Captain Morrison called environmental resistance testing. This involved Emma-Kate being exposed to various atmospheric conditions, temperature extremes, and atmospheric pressures that would have killed most species instantly. She endured sub-zero temperatures while wearing nothing but her jumpsuit, breathed air with oxygen levels that should have caused immediate brain damage, and remained conscious in atmospheric pressure that would have turned Quilex into a very unpleasant purple stain. Through it all, she maintained that unnervingly cheerful demeanor. "This is actually pretty mild compared to summer camp," she commented while standing in an atmosphere that was 70% methane. "At least nobody's trying to make me eat the survival rations." "Survival rations?" Quilex asked weakly. "Military emergency food," Captain Morrison explained. "Most adults can't keep them down. But the children can. Human children can eat almost anything," Emma-Kate said proudly. "I once survived for a week on nothing but tree bark and rainwater because I got lost during a school field trip." "You got lost and ate tree bark?" "Well, I also caught and ate some fish, found some edible roots, and built a shelter out of branches and mud. But the tree bark was definitely the hardest part to digest." Quilex was rapidly running out of things to say. This casual recounting of survival skills that would impress a seasoned military operative, delivered by someone who looked like she should be worried about homework, and whether her favorite band was going to come to her city on tour, was breaking his understanding of how the universe worked. The final demonstration was what Captain Morrison called problem-solving under pressure. Emma-Kate was presented with a series of increasingly complex puzzles and challenges, each one designed to test not just intelligence, but the ability to think clearly under stress. They started simple: escape from a locked room with limited tools. Emma-Kate examined the lock for exactly 30 seconds, then used a hairpin and her shoelace to create a makeshift lockpick. Time elapsed: 2 minutes, 17 seconds. Next, disable a simulated bomb with no prior knowledge of its construction. Emma-Kate studied the device for 3 minutes, asked 2 clarifying questions about the local electrical standards, then proceeded to disarm it using what appeared to be a combination of advanced electronics knowledge and pure intuition. Time elapsed: 11 minutes, 43 seconds. Final challenge: coordinate the rescue of simulated civilians from a disaster scenario using only limited resources and unreliable communication equipment. This was the kind of challenge that typically took military academies entire semesters to teach. Emma-Kate looked at the scenario for exactly 90 seconds, then began issuing orders with the calm authority of someone who had been doing this her entire life. She organized rescue teams, prioritized evacuation routes, allocated resources with mathematical precision, and maintained clear communication protocols even when the equipment began to fail. She solved the entire scenario in 26 minutes. "How?" Quilex asked, his voice barely a whisper. "How is this possible?" Emma-Kate shrugged, a gesture that somehow managed to be both modest and terrifying. "I don't know, it's just normal. This is what humans do." "This is what human children do," Captain Morrison corrected. "Emma-Kate is actually pretty average for her age group." "Average for her age group." Quilex felt his worldview crumbling around him like a poorly constructed sandcastle in a hurricane. "I think," he said slowly, "that we may have underestimated your species." Emma-Kate's grin returned, bright and cheerful and absolutely horrifying. "Oh, Ambassador Quilex," she said, "this was just the warm-up. Tomorrow we are going to show you what I can do when I'm actually trying." The meeting ended with Emma-Kate skipping back to the transport vessel, humming what sounded like a human battle song under her breath. Captain Morrison followed, leaving behind 2 deeply traumatized aliens and enough molted scales to fill a small spacecraft. Quilex stood in the empty docking bay, staring at the space where the most dangerous 12-year-old in the galaxy had just demonstrated why humans were called Deathworlders. His breathing apparatus wheezed as he tried to process what he had just witnessed. "Sir?" Zeebo asked, his voice barely audible over the sound of scales hitting the floor. "What are we going to tell the council?" Quilex considered this question for a long moment. How did one explain that they had just met a juvenile member of a species that treated survival as a recreational activity? How did one convey the casual way she had discussed eating tree bark and surviving assassination attempts? How did one describe watching a 12-year-old solve military-grade problems faster than most adults could even understand them? We are going to tell them, Quilex said finally, that we need to completely reconsider our relationship with humanity. Because of one child. Because that one child represents the average capability of her age group, Quilex replied, and if this is what they consider average. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Both aliens understood the implications. Somewhere in the distance they could hear Emma-Kate's voice carried on the recycled air of the station. Mom's going to be so proud. I didn't even break anything important this time. This time. Quilex shuddered and began the long walk back to his quarters, where he planned to spend the next several hours reconsidering everything he thought he knew about the galaxy's most terrifying species. Behind him, Zeebo began the unfortunate task of cleaning up what appeared to be roughly his own body weight in stress-molted scales. Tomorrow they would find out what Emma-Kate Thompson could do when she was actually trying. Quilex was already composing his letter of resignation. Ambassador Quilex had not slept well. In fact, he hadn't slept at all. He'd spent the entire night cycle reviewing footage from the previous day's demonstrations, hoping against hope that somehow the recordings would reveal that he'd hallucinated the whole thing. Unfortunately, the footage was crystal clear, and Emma-Kate Thompson remained just as terrifyingly competent as he remembered. Zeebo hadn't fared much better. The poor Vorthak had molted so extensively that the cleaning crew had filed a formal complaint about the volume of scales they'd had to remove from the guest quarters. He now looked like a freshly hatched lizard, all pink and vulnerable, which somehow made the situation even more pathetic. Perhaps, Zeebo suggested hopefully as they made their way back to the demonstration area, the humans have reconsidered. Perhaps they have realized that sending a juvenile to represent their species' capabilities was unwise. Quilex paused at the entrance to the main demonstration hall and peered through the observation window. What he saw made his remaining scales stand on end. Emma-Kate Thompson was already there. But this time she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by what appeared to be an entire arsenal of weapons, tools and devices that Quilex couldn't even begin to identify. Some of them were glowing. Others were making soft humming noises that suggested they contained enough energy to power a small moon. And in the center of it all, Emma-Kate sat cross-legged on the floor, methodically cleaning what looked like a weapon designed to end conversations permanently. "Oh good," Quilex muttered. "She brought friends." Captain Morrison emerged from behind a stack of equipment that hadn't been there the day before. He looked remarkably cheerful for someone who was apparently supervising the arming of a 12-year-old human. "Ambassador Quilex. Perfect timing. Emma-Kate's been looking forward to today's demonstrations all morning." "Demonstrations," Quilex repeated carefully, plural. "Oh yes. Yesterday was just physical and mental capabilities. Today we are covering tactical applications, creative problem-solving under extreme duress, and what Emma-Kate likes to call advanced human networking." "Networking?" Emma-Kate looked up from her weapon maintenance with that same bright, terrifying smile. "Kai, Ambassador Quilex. I hope you are ready for some real fun today. I have been practicing." Practicing. The word sent a chill down Quilex's spine that had nothing to do with the station's climate control. "What exactly?" he asked, with the careful tone of someone trying not to provoke a sleeping predator. "Will today's demonstrations involve scenario-based testing?" Captain Morrison explained, pulling up a holographic display that showed what appeared to be a three-dimensional maze filled with various obstacles, opponents, and hazards. "We have constructed a series of realistic combat situations that Emma-Kate will navigate and resolve." "Combat situations," Zeebo whispered, his newly grown scales already beginning to loosen. For a child, Emma-Kate stood up, securing her cleaned weapon to her jumpsuit with practiced ease. "Can we start with the hostage rescue scenario? I have got some new ideas I want to try out." New ideas. From a 12-year-old Deathworlder who considered yesterday's demonstrations to be a warm-up, Quilex was beginning to suspect that requesting this assignment had been the worst decision of his career, possibly of his entire existence. The first scenario was labeled Urban Hostage Rescue. Emma-Kate was given a briefing that would have challenged a team of Special Forces operatives. Hostile forces had taken civilians captive in a multi-level building. Communications were compromised. Time was limited, and the rules of engagement prohibited any actions that might harm the hostages. Emma-Kate listened to the briefing with the focused attention of a seasoned professional, asked 3 tactical questions that demonstrated a frightening understanding of military doctrine, and then requested 5 minutes to review the building's schematics. 5 minutes? Quilex asked Captain Morrison. Shouldn't she need more time to plan? Emma-Kate doesn't really do extended planning, Captain Morrison replied. She's more of an adaptive tactics specialist. What does that mean? It means she makes it up as she goes along, and somehow it always works. The scenario began with Emma-Kate standing outside a perfect replica of a 20-story urban building. Hostile forces represented by advanced combat drones programmed with military-grade tactics were positioned throughout the structure. Civilian drones, programmed to behave like terrified hostages, were scattered across multiple floors. Standard military doctrine would have called for careful reconnaissance, coordinated team movements, and methodical floor-by-floor clearing operations. The estimated time for a successful rescue by trained professionals was approximately 45 minutes. Emma-Kate looked at the building for exactly 30 seconds, then walked over to what appeared to be a maintenance panel on the side of the structure. What is she doing? Zeebo asked. I have no idea, Captain Morrison admitted, but in my experience that usually means something interesting is about to happen. Emma-Kate pulled out what looked like a standard multi-tool and began working on the maintenance panel. Within moments she had bypassed the security systems and gained access to the building's infrastructure controls. Oh, Quilex breathed, beginning to understand. She's not going to fight her way through the building. She's going to take control of the building itself, Captain Morrison finished, and Quilex could swear he heard pride in the human's voice. What followed was a masterclass in creative problem-solving that completely redefined Quilex's understanding of tactical thinking. Emma-Kate didn't just use the building systems, she turned the entire structure into a weapon against the hostile forces. She manipulated the lighting systems to create strategic blind spots, used the climate control to generate distracting noises that masked her movements, and somehow convinced the building's automated fire suppression system to deploy foam precisely where she needed cover. When she encountered hostile drones, she didn't engage them directly. Instead, she used the building's elevator system to trap them between floors, activated emergency lockdown procedures to seal them in rooms, and in one particularly creative moment, reprogrammed the building's cleaning robots to harass the enemy forces, the civilian hostages. She used the building's announcement system to provide them with precise instructions, guiding them to safety through maintenance corridors and service tunnels that the hostile forces hadn't even known existed. Total time elapsed, 11 minutes, 37 seconds. 0 casualties, all hostages rescued. All hostile forces neutralized without a single shot being fired. How? Quilex asked weakly. How did she even know those systems existed? Human children are naturally curious about how things work, Captain Morrison explained. Emma-Kate probably figured out the building's layout and systems the moment she saw the schematics. In 5 minutes, she's had a lot of practice reading technical diagrams. Her parents are both engineers. Of course they were. On a Deathworld, even the engineers probably needed military-grade problem-solving skills just to survive their daily commute. The second scenario was labeled a resource scarcity crisis management. Emma-Kate was presented with a situation that would have challenged a team of logistics specialists. Remote outpost with failing life support systems, limited supplies, and no possibility of immediate rescue. She was given a detailed inventory of available resources, a technical manual for the failing systems, and 24 hours of simulated time to develop a solution that would keep 30 people alive until help arrived. Emma-Kate read through the scenario parameters, examined the resource inventory, and then did something that made Quilex question his understanding of physics. She began building things, not just repairing the existing systems, but constructing entirely new devices from components that had never been intended to work together. She turned food processing equipment into air filtration systems, repurposed communication divisions as power generators, and somehow converted recreational equipment into water purification units. But what truly impressed Quilex wasn't the technical improvisation. It was the way Emma-Kate managed the human element of the crisis. She assigned tasks that kept people busy and focused, established communication protocols that prevented panic, and created contingency plans for 17 different potential complications. She's treating the people like another resource to be optimized, Quilex observed. Human social dynamics are just another system to be understood and managed. Captain Morrison agreed. Emma-Kate's particularly good at reading group psychology. She's 12. Yes, but she's been in group survival situations since she was 7. Summer camp, you know. Quilex was beginning to develop a healthy fear of human summer camps. The final scenario was the one that broke Quilex's understanding of reality completely. It was labeled First Contact Diplomatic Crisis, and it involved Emma-Kate being presented with a situation where human colonists had encountered an unknown alien species under hostile circumstances. Communications had broken down, violence seemed imminent, and traditional diplomatic protocols had failed. Emma-Kate was given basic information about the alien species, their apparent cultural preferences, and the series of misunderstandings that had led to the crisis. She was then placed in a simulation where she had to prevent an interspecies war using nothing but her communication skills and whatever creative solutions she could develop. Quilex watched fascinated despite himself as the 12-year-old human approached the simulated aliens with a combination of respect, curiosity, and absolutely fearless determination. She didn't try to impose human cultural norms. She didn't rely on standard diplomatic protocols. Instead, she observed the aliens' behavior patterns, identified their primary concerns, and found ways to address those concerns that didn't require either species to compromise their fundamental values. When language barriers prevented effective communication, she developed a series of visual and mathematical demonstrations that conveyed complex concepts without relying on words. When cultural misunderstandings threatened to escalate tensions, she found creative ways to reframe the situation that allowed both species to maintain their dignity. Most impressively, when the simulation threw her unexpected complications, because of course it did, Emma-Kate adapted her approach in real time, incorporating new information and adjusting her strategies without ever losing sight of her primary objective. The crisis was resolved in 2 hours and 14 minutes. Both species emerged from the simulation with increased respect for each other, established trade protocols, and preliminary agreements for cultural exchange programs. She just prevented an interspecies war, Quilex said, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma-Kate's always been good with people, Captain Morrison said casually. She was class president 3 years running. Class president. On a Deathworld, where the students were apparently capable of preventing interstellar conflicts before they hit puberty. Quilex sank into the nearest chair, which creaked alarmingly under his weight. His worldview hadn't just been challenged. It had been systematically dismantled and rebuilt from scratch. I think I understand now, he said slowly, why the rest of the galaxy finds humans so unsettling. Emma-Kate bounced over to where the aliens were sitting, her expression as bright and cheerful as ever. So, what did you think? Did I do okay? Okay. She had just demonstrated tactical brilliance, engineering genius, resource management expertise, and diplomatic skills that would have impressed seasoned professionals, and she was asking if she'd done okay. Emma-Kate, Quilex said carefully, can I ask you something? Sure. Do you consider yourself to be exceptional among humans your age? Emma-Kate tilted her head thoughtfully. Not really, I mean, I'm probably better at some things than others, but most of my friends could do similar stuff if they needed to. Tommy's better at engineering than I am, and Sarah's way better at reading people, and don't even get me started on what Maria can do with computers. Tommy, Sarah, Maria, more 12-year-old humans with capabilities that would terrify military commanders across the galaxy. How many humans are there? Quilex asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. About 8 billion, Captain Morrison replied helpfully, though that number's growing pretty quickly. 8 billion. 8 billion Deathworlders who considered Emma-Kate's capabilities to be normal. 8 billion beings who had been shaped by a planet that actively tried to kill them from the moment they were born. Quilex thought about his own species' greatest achievements, the magnificent cities they had built in perfect harmony with their planet's gentle ecosystems. The art they had created during centuries of peaceful contemplation, the philosophical advances they had made while pondering the nature of existence in their comfortable, safe environments. All of it suddenly seemed quaint. Ambassador Quilex. Emma-Kate's voice brought him back to the present. Are you okay? You look kind of shaky. I'm fine, Quilex lied. Just processing. Cool. So, do you want to see what happens when I actually have to try hard? Because Mom packed some really interesting scenarios in case these ones were too easy. Too easy. The scenarios that had redefined Quilex's understanding of intelligence, creativity, and capability had been too easy. That's very kind, Quilex managed, but I think we have learned everything we need to know. Emma-Kate looked disappointed. Are you sure? I brought my chemistry set. Chemistry set. A 12-year-old Deathworlder with a chemistry set. Quite sure, Quilex said quickly. Okay, but if you change your mind, I will be here for another week. Mom says I need to work on my people skills anyway. Her people skills. As if preventing interspecies wars wasn't enough of a demonstration of social competence. As Emma-Kate skipped away to help Captain Morrison pack up the demonstration equipment, Quilex turned to his aide. Zeebo, I want you to send a message to the Council immediately. What should I tell them, sir? Quilex considered this carefully. How did one explain that humanity wasn't just another spacefaring species? How did one convey that they had encountered a civilization where 12-year-olds possessed capabilities that would make seasoned military commanders weep with envy? Tell them, Quilex said finally, that our previous assessments of human capabilities were conservative. Conservative, sir. Extremely conservative. Tell them that Emma-Kate Thompson, a perfectly average human child, has demonstrated abilities that exceed our most optimistic projections for their species' potential. And what are your recommendations, sir? Quilex watched as Emma-Kate cheerfully organized explosive devices with the casual competence of someone who considered such things to be perfectly normal. Recommend that we do whatever it takes to ensure humans remain our allies. Because if this is what they consider a friendly demonstration— He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. In the distance, Emma-Kate's voice carried across the demonstration area. Hey, Captain Morrison, can I show them the thing with the plasma conduits next time? Pretty please? Quilex shuddered and began composing a very different kind of message to the Council than the one he'd originally planned. A message that began with the words urgent, revise all previous assessments of human capabilities, and ended with a formal request for immediate assignment to the furthest, safest corner of the galaxy. Because Emma-Kate Thompson might have been the youngest Deathworlder ever born, but as it turned out, she was also exactly what Quilex had feared she would be. She was normal. And that, more than anything else, was absolutely terrifying.